intercourse. What does that word mean to you? Are you comfortable with that word? And what about when it's spoken in church? Yeah. You know, intercourse, which has the same root word as the word discourse, originally meant a meaningful exchange or communication. And then, in the late 1700s, that term began to be applied to sex. Now, sex is something that we as a society seem to talk about all the time, right? In the news and in the media. But it seems to me that it's something we never really talk about. And in our failure to do so, our sexuality remains repressed, unconscious, shadowed. And then it shows up in things like sexual violence, the objectification of both men and women nowadays in advertising. It shows up in things like incest, misogyny, sex addiction, sexual anorexia, sex trafficking, infidelity. It also shows up in things like politicians who campaign against sex crimes only to be found committing the same. And it shows up in our spiritual leaders who abuse their power and authority. It shows up in hate crimes and in suicide based on one's sexual orientation. What to me could be this beautiful and loving, spirit-filled expression of the divine has too often, in my view, been an angry and manipulative and certainly misguided seeking on the surface of things and of people for some semblance of love, connection, intimacy, and soul. My talk title, Enlightened Intercourse, embodies my hope that by engaging in ongoing, meaningful dialogues about our sexuality, that we can begin to heal our sexual shadow, individual and collective, beginning with our own. So today, first, I'm going to invite us to explore what are our attitudes and beliefs about sex. And then second, I'll invite us to consider what might enlightened sexual expression look like for each of us. And then finally, I'll invite us to look at how truth teachings might come to bear on our healing in this area. So first, what are our attitudes and beliefs about sex? Certainly, societal norms have changed over time, right? There was a time when chastity was emphasized, and a time when free love was the way to go, right? And then there's today, which to me is filled with mixed messages. I've heard traditional Christianity says on the one hand that sex is dirty. And then on the other hand, you only do it with the one you love? Right? So confusing. What are our attitudes and beliefs about sex? Is sex dirty? Are we dirty because we have sex? Am I lovable if I'm not sexually desirable? What is sex about for me? Is it about love? Or power? Lust? What about security? Are my sexual organs shameful? What if I'm barren or impotent? Are women slutty if we have sex too often or too quickly? Are men not real men if they don't have sex any chance they can get? Right? Is sex painful? Is it scary? What are our attitudes and beliefs about sex? For me personally, I have been grappling with these questions for myself for the past decade of my life, since April 2004, when sexual and relationship issues devastated my life. By what I can only call grace, I found myself in a 12-step recovery room. And I remember that one of the first things that I learned in working the steps is the immense amount of shame, guilt, and unworthiness that perpetuated the cycle of my addiction. You see, the more I lied to myself and others, the more I hurt myself and others, the more I put myself into dangerous situations, the more I isolated myself from others so that no one in my life would know what I was doing with my time, the less worthy of love that I felt, God's, my own, or anyone else's. And the more I turned to my addiction to alleviate that sense of pain and guilt and absolute emptiness that was inside of me. I remember my very first 12-step meeting. I was very enthusiastic and hopeful. And so I come in and I shared, I was like, this could help me. And so I shared, I want to transform everything that is ugly in me. And this woman comes up to me privately after the meeting, and she turns to me and she says, I do not think that there is anything ugly in you. I do not think that there is anything ugly in you. Of course, I didn't believe her at the time. And in fact, what I thought was, oh, well, you don't really know me yet. But you know, I never forgot her words. And then, 9 months later, I found A Course in Miracles. And then 2 months after that, I found Unity in Marin. And both spiritual communities bombarded me with this message: God is all that is. I am part of God. and therefore I am holy. I am part of God. Therefore, I am holy. This truth transformed my life. It transformed me, transformed my life, and kept me from acting out on my multiple addictions. And it did so, not perfectly, and not immediately, but gradually, over years. So, over years of 12-step work, forgiveness work, prayer work, holotropic breath work, chanting, equine therapy, hypnotherapy, sound healing, oneness blessings. I mean, seriously, I was from the Bay Area, so we tried everything. It was all there for me, and it was awesome, but it took years of doing this and getting it right. So over years, I came to learn to live more from my own wholeness, rather than from a seeking outside of me based on some perceived emptiness that I felt inside, seeking through relationships with people I didn't necessarily respect, like, or sometimes even know. So, as I began to restore my relationship with God, with myself, and with others, I began to attract and be attracted to people who could actually see me and know me and love me. And then I started to actually believe that I was lovable. And I started to open my heart again and start to be able to learn how to love. So those of you who are Facebook friends with me know that I talk a lot on Facebook about my great relationship with Victor here, and I rave about it a lot. I hope that today you have actually a deeper understanding of why it is so immensely meaningful to me that I have this amazing spiritual partnership with someone who can see me, know me, and love me. And I won't embarrass him too much by talking about our meaningful, nightly discourse. So, enlightened intercourse. Moving on to point 2. Where was I? So, seriously. What does enlightened intercourse look like? Right? What does it look like to come from a knowing of our wholeness? Well, certainly it helps to have a little humor in our lives. But I know that each of us can only determine this for ourselves, right? But for me, I can share that what happened for me is I started to set these intentions around relationship. And along with the 12-step mantra, progress, not perfection, I set these as intentions. Okay? So the first one was to be loving and compassionate. And that may seem obvious, but I can tell you that was not always my goal. And the second one was to be fully present in my heart, in my mind, and in my body. And surely this is important as a spiritual practice in general, but I gotta tell you, with my wounds around sexuality, the struggles to be completely present in that moment, when most of my life, all I did was check out. in order to be safe. The other piece is diligence. It's a tricky business, this ego, right? So it's important to me to remain vigilant to the times when I might be seeking romance or sexuality in order to feed a hunger rather than to express love. Fourth is complete openness. To me, the life of spirit means that I have to be radically open to how spirit shows up in my life at any point. This means, frankly, that I'm even open to an entirely new sexual identity. To me, the life of spirit means I have to be that open to who I could possibly be as I deepen my relationship with God. And finally, authenticity. Authenticity, especially when it bucks the norm. And on that point, I want to share about celibacy. You see, I think that there's this modern bias that a healthy sex life means an active sex life, right? But I don't think this is by any means wrong. But I think it shouldn't come in reaction to our repressed sexuality. And in fact, many spiritual traditions, Taoism, Catholicism, even Unity and Fillmore's teachings talk about, if not outright celibacy, the husbanding of our sexual energy, or our chi. And in his book, The Soul of Sex, Thomas More, a former Catholic monk, writes about his experiences in celibacy for 12 years. And by the way, I just returned that book to the library, so any of you guys can check it out now. It's at the Unity Library right here. And what's great about his story is that he has both sides, both perspectives. So 12-step groups on sex addiction often recommend a period of celibacy. And in fact, I went through 2 such periods of 6 months at a time with complete abstinence from not only sexual, but any type of romantic relations. And I gotta tell you, I don't think that without that time of really getting steeped and anchored in the knowing of the God within me, could I even deign to approach relationship without losing that center completely. So I felt like that was a vital stepping stone to my being able to be whole in relationship. On this, Thomas More has this beautiful quote on celibacy. He says, "We may breathe soul into our days with a simple and subtle kind of sexual purity. An empty space in a crowded world of sexual preoccupation, and yet a space that is not formed by repression and is not outside the realm of the sexual. An empty space in a crowded world of sexual preoccupation." Notably, during his celibate years, Moore became open to the world of what he describes as the extended erotic life of the objects that fill our world and contribute immensely to our lives. His most treasured object was his piano. And indeed, with the proper instrument, an ecstatic sex life certainly does not need to involve a single other person. So, these are just a few ideas about what might be part of a healthy sexuality. It's always important to ask ourselves, what is true for my soul today? Perhaps that means sharing more intimacy during sex. Perhaps it means leaving an abusive relationship. Committing to monogamy, possibly for the first time ever in your life. Or trying out polyamory for the first time. Maybe it means actually making masturbation okay and not shameful. Maybe it means that you're setting boundaries that respect and honor yourself even within your own marriage. Maybe you've been showing up in ways in your own partnership that don't truly honor your highest self. Maybe it means playing the piano more, creating more art or music. I know, as eloquently offered by my musician fiancé, Victor, these are his words, by the way, enlightened intercourse could reflect the deeper realization that the desire for creativity doesn't always mean bumping uglies. Yeah, that's Victor. So my last point, how might we heal around our sexuality? Again, humor helps, right? But of course, there's no one simple equation. A powerful truth teaching that has been my cornerstone is embodied in our two basic unity principles. There is only one power and one presence active in my life, God the good, in all, through all, and over all, including me. And a friend from Unity in Marin back home, hi Josh, put the statement of truth to music. And so we're going to close our time together today by chanting or singing that song. I actually used it as a chant and sang it in my car. So that's one way. Another thing that's worked really well for me are unity, denials, and affirmations. Now, for those of you who are new to unity, an affirmation is a statement of ultimate truth. It's something that is unchangeable, such as God is good, I am whole, God is all that is. Affirmations are statements of absolute, ultimate, unchangeable truth. And then denials. Charles Fillmore, co-founder of the Unity movement, says that a denial is a putting away of the mental error and an entering into conscious relaxation of both mind and body. Putting away of the mental error and entering into conscious relaxation of mind and body, letting go of what is untrue, right? I bring up both denials and affirmations because I want to make a very important distinction between psychological denial and unity prayer denial. Psychological denial would mean I deny that I have an addiction problem, and then it never gets healed. Unity denial admits that I was immersed in my addiction, but says that this circumstance has no power over my present good. But it first admits the factual circumstance. I believe that we fail to heal often in unity because we practice only with affirmations. Because that can tend to keep us in psychological denial. For instance, let's say someone abuses me, and I go, I am love. I am love. And I just jump to this affirmation because I want to be a good truth student. I want to be a good person. So I want to be forgiving and just claim this truth as an affirmation, right? We tend to do that in unity. But what happens is that experience, the experience of anger and of hurt just gets shoved down there. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't move. And in fact, it becomes unconscious, so we don't even know it exists. So it just shows up in our lives, kind of leaking out in various ways. That's what happens when we just jump too quickly to affirmations. But if instead we were to practice denials, it would invite us to first consider the circumstance of, whoa, I've experienced this abuse and it hurts. And I'm angry. Wow, to really feel that first and then go, wow, yeah. And this has no power over my good. Affirmations and denials. So I just mentioned forgiveness. And by the way, forgiveness in unity is actually a form of denial. But I want to say that I've talked a lot, if you remember just one thing from today's talk, I hope that this is it. Compassion. Compassion for yourself, compassion for others around you. Because one of my biggest mistakes in 12-step became one of my greatest healing experiences because I was able to love myself through it. What happened was I was a year into program and I ended up slipping and getting together with my ex. So there I was lying in bed. I think I've been crying for hours. And I was in such despair because here I was, I'm a year into program. I have sponsees. What am I going to do? How can I go back there? I can't go back there. I can't tell anyone what just happened. So I was starting to spiral down again and going, this is it. I can't face everybody. And so in that spiraling, I remember just lying there, crying, weeping, and wiping my nose. And then I'm like, oh, all this love thing, that I've been learning. This is the time. This is the time when I should be loving myself more, not less. This is the time that I get to practice that. And so, I'm suddenly feeling a little more energetic. And those of you who really know me well will not be surprised because the next thing I did was I got up and I went to the gym. And my favorite place in the world. And so, I rallied myself up after, crying for like 2 hours. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make it. I am going to make it. And so I got up and I did what I often did in that day, which is that I carried my Course in Miracles book with me. And so there I was with this big blue book. And I got on the elliptical machine and I put the book down and I'm going on the machine. And I did what I often do, which is I closed my eyes and just opened the book to a page. And I opened to lesson 46. And I'm not going to read the entire lesson to you right now, but what it says essentially is this. God does not forgive because God has never condemned. Just as you condemn yourself, so must you forgive yourself. And forgiving myself was that most radical act of divine love that I needed to move forward into my recovery. I told my sponsor and everything and moved on. So, I invite you all to remember that when, despite our best efforts, we make mistakes along the way, to be super gentle with ourselves, to forgive and to give love to ourselves. As said in Romans, owe no one anything except to love one another. For the one who loves has fulfilled the law. The one who loves has fulfilled the law. In conclusion, I want to thank you all for bearing with me on this very sensitive topic. And I hope that today's talk served you on your own healing journey. To further this end, I made gifts for everybody, a fig leaf. I cut them all myself. It's a lot of work, but I prayed while I was doing it. And I want to say, aren't they cute? That it harkens back, right, to the Adam and Eve story. and when you look at this fig leaf, I want you to consider what in you is beautiful and powerful that you have hidden behind this, because someone along the way told you that this was not okay. My hope is that we might declare, as said in Psalms 139, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light around me become night. Even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am wonderfully made. As you proceed along your journey, I encourage you, if you aren't already, to seek support from other people, a trusted minister, a friend, a community, a therapist. Ultimately, I hope you know that in your journey, you are certainly not alone, and there is nothing ugly in you. Thank you.